Welcome to Vanguard, a podcast of radical traditionalism. Here's your host, Richard Spencer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vanguard. After quite a long absence, we're glad to be back. Joining me, as usual, are Colin Liddell and Andy Nowicki. I'm actually here. It's about 9:40 my time, so I'm enjoying a bourbon, which is my custom around this hour, and it's quite early in the morning for Colin, so I don't think Colin is enjoying any hot sake at the moment. Are you drinking orange juice, Colin, or hot tea?
No, I'm just fizzy water.
Oh, okay. Fizzy water will do.
Yeah, for the night before, yeah.
Andy, how about you over in Savannah, Georgia?
I am dry. I'm going. I'm a teetotaler tonight.
Okay, well we'll forgive it. We'll forgive you that this once. Well, first off, let me just say a few things in the way of housekeeping. I apologize that we've really taken an absence of around 2 months or so, and also related to this is the fact that my journal, in which is called Radix, in which Colin and Andy both appear with two very good articles, has also been delayed quite a few months. And these two things are related. I've had to deal with a rather large problem that's really monopolized my time. It's really not personal at all, and there's no deaths involved or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about it. And it has been resolved satisfactorily, but it really did monopolize my time for a long stretch, really. But that is now over, so I'm happy to announce that Radix will be released on Monday. We're actually recording this on a Saturday night. Yes, woohoo. We're recording this on a Saturday night because Andy and I are losers, I guess. We have nothing better to do but stare at our computer and talk about stuff.
Boring family men. Middle-aged family men.
Right. But on Monday, I'll actually be sending out e-copies to everyone who subscribed, and I'll also be sending it to the printer. So Radix will be done very shortly, and then after I spent a lot of time, as you'll see, Radix is really aesthetically interesting and hopefully beautiful, and I really think that I created a very strong template for moving forward, and so the forthcoming issues will be a lot easier to create in the sense that they'll be involved. We're going to obviously tweak the template for every issue because every issue has a new theme, but it will be a lot easier to to tweak the template as opposed to create a template out of thin air. And if you're interested in it, you can actually look at a new website I created called radixjournal.com. And there you can subscribe to Radix Journal, and I'll keep it. I won't really be blogging there, but I'll keep it relatively up to date. So there'll be some new stuff there, and you can order a copy, or once the book is printed, you'll have links to order a copy on Amazon if you'd like, if you don't want to subscribe, so on and so forth. So just keep, maybe just put that into your bookmarks, radixjournal.com. Okay, well, let's get started. As I mentioned, joining me are two experts in American politics. These guys live and breathe the stuff. They're wonks. They check out polls constantly and things like that. So they're really well positioned to talk about. No, we were thinking, as much as we hate to do it, I think we probably should talk about the election because I know that's on everyone's minds. It's almost impossible for it not to be on your mind because we're inundated with 24/7 news cycle and all that kind of stuff. I did want to, let me just start off by talking a little bit about the reality of the situation. As many of you know, it's pretty much a neck-and-neck race if you judge the race as a Coke versus Pepsi horse race in a national election. If you look at national polls, I'm seeing this one. This is actually the Real Clear Politics average. Real Clear Politics, by the way, is a Republican-leaning, at least editorially, website. But and they also do things like average many different polls, so you really you can get a much more accurate picture of things. But they are Republican-leaning, but I think they're pretty. When it comes to just averaging polling, they're about as objective as you can get. If you look at that national poll, it's basically 47-47, extremely close. However, once you think about the fact that presidents aren't elected on national polls, they're elected through this rather complicated and maybe even arcane system called, the Electoral College, where you have certain delegates are given to states based on their population size and maybe some other factors, and that these delegates essentially elect the president. So it's not as simple as a national election. I'm sure there are many people out there who would rather there be a national election. But anyway, basically you've got to win these states, and some states are more important than other states. And if you look actually at the in-trade odds, and that's an interesting system where essentially you are betting on current events. It's called intrade.com. You can check it out. So you can essentially, and they do it not as in terms of like Vegas might do it with odds or so on and so forth. They do it much like kind of like a stock market in a way. So you can buy shares in Romney, and that means that your share will be worth $1 if Romney wins. It'll be worth $0 if Romney loses. And so the price of the share is discounted accordingly. And essentially, in trade, if you go by...
It's so bizarre to me, all this stuff, but I'm sorry to go on.
Well, it is, but in some ways, I think it's very telling in the sense that you can really look at how people are willing to make bets. And the market in itself is a kind of average of those bets. So you get a lot of things. I'm sure there are tons of people who have no knowledge whatsoever, but then a lot of people who probably have inside knowledge. There are other people who have objective knowledge. So anyway, in trade favors Obama to win by 67%. So that's pretty high. Essentially, according to people who are putting their money on the line, it's over.
What was their record last time round though?
Well,
or did they not exist then?
No. They existed. It's hard to say the record because it's like a stock market essentially. So it keeps reflecting what the consensus.
Keeps reflecting the perceived reality, though.
Right, that's true. It keeps reflecting the perceived reality until it becomes reality. But
if you consider that the media is biased in favor of Obama, then obviously that would skew the result in Obama's favor, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I think the people who go into in-trade, they probably know that.
So they discount for that?
Yeah, I think they do. And, for instance, it's kind of a funny thing. I mean, you can literally still buy stock in Sarah Palin winning the presidency. And so you could do some crazy thing and be like, I know it's probably not going to happen, but I'm going to spend $100 buying stock in Sarah Palin winning the presidency at like half a cent or whatever it's trading at. And let's say you buy all that, and then there's over the weekend, there's some amazing, miracle. The American public, they wake up that we need a real American in the White House, and they all just spontaneously write in Sarah Palin, and then you'd become like, you'd be just a millionaire, afterwards. So, because you made this big bet. So anyway.
Just like if you bet on a horse that's not, that's 1,000,000 to 1 odds, and
exactly.
he happens to win.
Right.
Kind of thing.
You'd be betting on a dark moose, so to speak. Anyway, that's kind of how it goes. But I think to go back to Colin's question, the in-trade hasn't changed that much. I mean, it's gone up and down. I don't think there was ever a time when Romney was favored. I'm actually just looking at that right now because they have it almost like a Dow Jones industrial average. No, I take that back. It looked like, oh, no, well, yeah, for around a year ago, it looked like Obama actually was below 50%. That's interesting. But at least since the summer, he's been very solidly in favor. He got as high as just under 80%. Anyway, also, if you look at these state-by-state polls, Obama, he is pretty much neck and neck in Virginia. He's a little bit down in Florida. He has substantial leads in Ohio, Colorado, Iowa, New Hampshire. Let me keep going on. Nevada, Wisconsin, he has a 5-point lead. Pennsylvania, Michigan. These are all states that are essentially in play and that are essentially swing states, and a lot of them carry a lot of delegates. So essentially it's very important to win these. But anyway, I've been talking too long about this. I think all I need to say is that it appears that Obama is in a commanding position, electorally speaking. And I'll ask both of your opinions on that. One thing that I have noticed is that if you get your news from the Drudge Report or Fox News, I think you might be under the impression that Romney is going to win in a landslide. Have you noticed that? I mean, we all talk about, liberal bias or something, but if you really can get into a Republican echo chamber, and there seems to be a really strong disconnect with reality amongst these Republicans. There seems to be a much greater denial than, I can remember when I was a kid and Bob Dole was running, and, I don't think anyone was actually claiming that he would win there at the end, But now we have people saying, like, landslide for Romney. That was actually Dick Morris said that. So anyway, what do you guys think about just your thoughts on, the election and the kind of reality of the election, and then also maybe some of this Republican denial that seems to be going on?
Well, this is the first time I've heard personally I've sort of made a conscious effort to block out all election news lately. So this is the first I've heard about all the stock trading or bond trading, or however you want to call it, in the two candidates and what that might signify. If I'm prognosticating what's going to happen on Tuesday, I might not exactly be the one to listen to as far as these things go, as you kind of sarcastically pointed out a few minutes ago. I have a hard time seeing Obama getting reelected.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's my impression, and again, could be totally wrong. I know that there are people who swear by him and certainly around and who love him and think he can do no wrong still. And of course, where I live in the American South, something I noted just recently is you could almost inevitably tell the race of who's living at a particular house by what president they're endorsing. If there's a Romney sign on the outside of that house, it's a white family. If it's an Obama sign, it's almost definitely a black family. Of course, I live somewhere where there's a larger black population than typically in the country. So I know that there are still people. Blacks will vote, of course, as a bloc for Obama overwhelmingly, even more than they normally do.
Yeah.
For the typical Democrat. But to me, I just don't. And maybe again, I could be wrong. I probably am totally wrong if the things you've been saying, Richard, are true. But it just seems like I would imagine that the motivation behind the people voting for Romney who want to change, I just see them being much more fired up. And I see the Obama people kind of, being more likely to sit on their hands, to be disillusioned, considering,
well, he's
what the last
definitely
4 years have been like.
Yeah, he's limping into the White House. I mean, the whole hope and change stuff is gone. What about in Colin in Japan? What are Japanese people's feelings towards Obama like?
Well, basically the news coverage just tends to echo whatever they get from America. But among the Japanese people themselves, they they definitely seem to like Obama. And,
why is that, do you think?
I think there's probably a couple of reasons. One reason is just his name. It sounds Japanese. There's a town of Obama in Japan.
Right.
And the other thing is he sort of comes across as not black or white, but more as Asian, I always feel. And that seems to resonate with Japanese people a bit more. They kind of instinctively feel he's more Asian than anything else.
That's funny.
Yeah, and also I think there's a kind of residual resentment against the kind of old America, which is related, of course, to the war.
Yeah.
And people like Roosevelt and Truman, and that's a little bit buried under the surface, but it's definitely there.
You think there's a strong anti-American sentiment? I mean, I think at least from the American perspective, we almost think of the Japanese as almost falling over themselves to be a pro-American and things like that. I mean, there hasn't been very many diplomatic tensions or anything like that since the Second World War. But you think there is a nationalist streak there that is maybe not talked about, but is ever present. I guess even amongst younger people. Maybe
wrong to dignify it with the name nationalist, but there's a certain kind of nebulous chauvinism.
Yeah.
Why would Obama be more somebody that a nebulous Japanese chauvinist would favor than Romney? Just out of curiosity.
Well, it's more like this is just like among normal people. It's not people who are right wing or sort of wanting to rebuild Japan into a great power. It's just like a kind of common feeling amongst ordinary people, and they just seem to sort of take him in a way. There's a kind of, it's a slightly ironic take as well, So it's not a simple preference.
But if I were a foreign to the United States, if I were a European or something like that, and I see this amongst some European friends, and I'm not really talking about someone who's reading alt-right and related websites and reading Evola in his spare time. I'm talking more about a normal person. I would probably favor Obama just simply because the Bush years were just so. They were really traumatic for Europeans. They set the tone for a feeling about America as just a bunch of blustering fools who are shooting their bazooka off in every which direction. And it just seems like you think that Obama, he's a liberal. He's not some kind of American. I also won't dignify an Americanist. I won't dignify that with the name nationalist because it isn't really some weird American imperialist, shooting from the hip and, calling anyone who doesn't want to support the Iraq invasion a wimp or, all this. I think I would probably support Obama as just kind of someone who seems a little more liberal, a little more weak, just someone who I could trust not to invade more countries. Of course, Obama has invaded countries.
Yeah.
Do. But still.
Well, I remember it kind of reminds me of reading in 2004 when George W. Bush was up for re-election, how just about everywhere in the world they wanted Kerry to win.
Yeah.
And it was probably not because of some favoring some liberal versus conservative, as we think of it here in the United States kind of paradigm, but rather just, thinking of Bush as somebody who is going to invade all of these countries and I don't know, destabilize the world and so forth. And his opposition being more a voice of moderation, I guess.
Yeah. Let me throw out a slightly new topic in all this, and that is this idea of the majority strategy. And, if you just Google the majority strategy, I bet actually in MPI, which is a group I work with, and my name will probably come up, we did a small press conference on this a little over a year ago, where we talked about this idea. It's basically this idea that the GOP should stop bothering reaching out to Hispanics and blacks and immigrants, and that they should just they should own up to the reality, which is that they are the white people's party, and that they should also pursue issues that are quite popular amongst white people. And if you actually look at things, a lot of these issues that the GOP runs on, like warmongering, or even some of the social issues, like abortion, for one, they actually are not. None of these are really overwhelmingly popular. They're actually pretty divisive amongst all classes, even. But if you look at immigration, you actually have a major consensus that there's too much immigration in the country, and it seems like this is what you should pursue. And this argument was really first pursued by Sam Francis, who's a very interesting guy. If anyone listening to this doesn't know him, I recommend Googling him. And it's been put forth more recently by Steve Saylor and Peter Brimelow at VDare. And that, indeed, VDare is a one-issue website, and Brimelow never tires of pounding the table about the majority strategy, or what he calls the Saylor strategy, and this idea that the GOP should win on just a big immigration campaign and things like that. And let me just introduce a few complications to that story. The first is that the GOP was very pro-immigration restriction or patriotic immigration reform during the primaries. Even Romney made a lot of noises. I remember he went after Rick Perry for, being pro-Mexican immigrant. Rick Perry's, of course, the governor of Texas. And, all of them were pretty much pro-immigration. Once the general started, Romney effectively did a kind of etch-a-sketch routine, and he became much, much softer. I remember when Obama did something where he was actually going to, by executive order, allow immigrants into the country, and Romney, he didn't even oppose it. He was kind of like, well, that's going to prevent us from reaching a permanent solution. Well, it seemed like that was Obama from the perspective of, say, Peter Brimelow and VDare and majority strategy advocates. That was just like a gift Obama had given him. He should have come out strong and been, really pro-American majority and anti-immigration. But the only thing I would say about that view, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think there's clearly a lot of truth there, that if that things like immigration are something to rally around. But in some ways, what I think is happening, if you look at 2010, 90% of the votes cast for Republicans were cast by white people, and some 60% of whites voted Republican. So you see the white population becoming much more monolithic, almost like the black population, and not quite as monolithic, but getting there. And I think what you effectively found, that's happening again. I am positive that they're going to do some exit poll analysis afterward, and people like Ron Brownstein are going to be horrified. They're going to be like, oh my God, 65% of these racist. They vote on skin color alone. You can just predict all the nonsense they're going to talk about. And, but I think basically what's happening is that the GOP is effectively the white party, but they don't have to stress the immigration issue and conceivably alienate Hispanics, and also, probably more important, alienate soccer moms and let's say stockbroker Republican, wealthy Republicans who don't want to be part of a racist party. So they can basically keep those guys in, and they can just let the Democrats be anti-white, and it's a two-party system anyway, so they're going to get the white people. I mean, so I think what I'm trying to get at is that there's this almost both terrible and ironic situation where the GOP wins due to the majority strategy, but they don't have to do anything. They can just be themselves, and they'll get all these white people who think that the Republican Party can save them to vote for them. It's
and
kind
then
of
they won't do anything.
Yeah, and they won't do anything
after they're elected.
Yeah, I remember actually, Andy, you attended our MPI conference, and I played this speech by the great Enoch Powell. he was saying that he goes, the Tories expected to gain votes from the immigration strategy, but not have to do anything about it. And that is exactly what the GOP does all the time. So anyway, that's kind of my ironic take, is that going forward, just to sum it up, going forward, the GOP might become even whiter and whiter and whiter in terms of the people who vote for it, all this kind of stuff. And sadly, just because white people are aging, we might have these horrible geriatric candidates like Newt and, Newt 2016 or, oh, God. Enough to make you want to swallow a cyanide tablet or something. But anyway, so the GOP is going to become the white party, but they're going to do less and less for white people. I think it's a terrible dialectic. But anyway, what say you guys?
Well, I remember you were going to relate this to Pat Buchanan's endorsement of Romney. Did you want to talk about that, or?
Oh yeah, we can go into that. I think that's probably the next issue.
I don't know if that's the same issue or a similar issue, but I don't know if I can add very much. I think you've ably said it all, pretty much as far as that goes.
I agree, Andy. That's why I keep you around.
I'll just say that's right, Richard.
The other aspect when you talk about the majority strategy is the alternative strategy, which is a kind of third-party strategy. Some people think you should give up on the majority strategy because of all the reasons you've outlined.
Yeah.
And it's time to sort of go alone and have a party which specifically sort of states white interests and tries to pursue them in some way. So that's the other side of the coin. And, of course, the reason people don't really support the third-party strategy so much is because basically political realities are that the American system is this duopoly where we have these two parties who are always going to contest power, and it's almost impossible for anybody to sort of break through.
It is.
But the third party is not as powerless as that may suggest, because, third parties have played a very important role in American politics, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If you look throw a wrench into things.
Yes. Maybe. So, the reason Clinton was in power for so long was because of Ross Perot, wasn't it?
That's very much the case. Yeah, right in the early '90s, there really was something. Granted, this guy was a multimillionaire, but there was an interesting populist movement behind him. That was a kind of window that opened and then seemed to close just as quickly.
And I think Al Gore suffered as well from a third party, didn't he?
He did a little bit. Nader wasn't as powerful as Perot, but Nader did, without question, take away votes. And
which was a very tight election. So and we're talking about this election as extremely tight, 47, 48, whatever. And so obviously a well-organized third party that has some sort of appeal could definitely throw it either way.
Yeah.
And, there's really nobody out there like that now, is there? Unless I'm not aware of them. Is there some possible third party that's going to...
No, I don't see it. And I think maybe liberals learned a lesson to rally behind their candidate after the 2000. The Buchanan thing, that also started in 92, and that was a real force. And Buchanan really didn't get much of anywhere in 2000 when he did run as a candidate, and then he made some kind of strange moves as a political candidate in 2000. We have the A3P now. I don't know. I don't even know if we want to talk about them. I've been very how do I say? I've been baffled by some of these statements by their candidate, Merlin Miller, who seems to, the central people who are going to vote for him would be what are wrongly or rightly called white nationalists, people who are racially conscious. And he seems to be bashing them or doing all this kind of stuff and focusing on Zionism and things that don't, certainly important issues don't really speak to people, and then just kind of presenting himself as a Ron Paulite, a libertarian, a kind of Me Tooism, which seems very strange. He actually went on Iranian TV and suggested that Mossad was behind 9/11. Which is a rather provocative statement, to say the least. I mean, not, since we don't have anything approaching definitive evidence, I don't think a candidate should be suggesting that. Maybe an historian, but still, it's just really highly provocative. And then she asked him if he were a racist, and he was like, "Good God, no! Of course not. I'm not a." So he was more willing to suggest that Mossad was behind 9/11 than to admit that he prefers white people to others.
He might as well say that he's a racist after he said the first thing.
Right. I mean, I don't know how.
What does he have to lose?
He has nothing to
after saying
lose.
Mossad did 9/11.
Yeah, he has nothing to lose. Again, I think everyone, it's just it's a historical question, and it is a little bit loony, and we don't until someone can have evidence. I just don't think you should say things like that.
Yeah.
As a political candidate, it's ridiculous to say things like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
he seems to be believing in a conspiracy theory, which leads to the supposition that maybe he's part of his own conspiracy theory to sort of spike the third party option.
Well, he might not be nearly that interesting, Colin. But yeah.
But you mentioned.
Go ahead.
You mentioned Ron Paul a moment ago. Strange to say I'd forgotten about him, but he's been a very potent force. I mean, he lost, he didn't get the nomination, but if someone like him were running as a third party candidate, that would shake things up, tremendously.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, Ron Paul is interesting, and he is as an avuncular figure. I think people like him as opposed to other, core libertarian types. But I guess my view of it is that the libertarians are going to probably always be maybe 5 to 10% of the nation, and they'll always be that way. And sometimes that they'll have a way of expressing themselves, like through the Ron Paul candidate, and then people will be like, "Look, it's on the rise," and then it will kind of disappear. But I think it just basically remains that, and also I think the GOP will do some actions to keep those people voting Republican. I think they might throw up Rand Paul or something. Rand seems less interesting than his father, and to me at least, and he seems just more of a get along GOP type. So anyway,
I think looking at the future, the way to win elections will be to surreptitiously start third parties that take votes off your rival.
A lot of people
I'm sure they've tried that before.
Yeah, I think I don't know my history. I think people have suggested that was actually even like Theodore Roosevelt's third run for presidency or something. Oh, I guess he was. What was he? He was a vice president. Then he ran once on his own. Then he didn't run again. Then I think he ran again with the Bull Moose Party. I think I've even read some stuff that people suggested that. Yeah, I could imagine that they might do something like that. Have like the Hispanic Party or something, and then just do that to help Democrats.
Right, and I'm sure there might be like tacit approval of like when Nader was running in 2000. I'm sure some Republicans were like, "This is we're trying to encourage that."
Yeah,
to try to so that he would take votes away from Gore, which he ended up doing.
Yeah. Well, hey guys. Go ahead, Colin.
Just to continue on the theme of the third party, I think any pro-white third party should be positioned so as to threaten the Democrats and the Republicans equally.
Yes.
Because if it just takes votes from the Republicans, great, the Democrats will be sort of like celebrated. If the party is positioned so that it can actually hurt either party, then what happens is they then become concerned about keeping their voter base, and then it becomes a kind of bidding war almost. And so that would produce...
Which was sort of the case with Ron Paul, because he was pro-business or pro-capitalism, but he was also anti-war. So he was kind of interesting in that respect. Although I guess most of his votes were probably coming from people who were right of center. But I think there were some lefties who liked him too.
Yeah, some lefties got into Ron Paul. Colin, do you think the BNP did that because they had real working class appeal? They took votes away from Labour and not just from the Tories?
Well, they had the potential to take votes away from both. I think overall, though, they tended to get more votes from working class people, and so therefore they were more of a threat to Labour.
Yeah, interesting.
They did actually sit across that divide, in a kind of true third-party style. And of course, now of course the BNP is on its last legs, and so we'll never know.
Yeah.
But I think they did actually exert quite a considerable influence during the previous Labour government. They did. The Labour government were forced to water down a lot of things because they were actually terrified of the BNP coming in and hoovering up votes in their heartland areas.
Well, I mean, this also brings up another question, which is that I actually wrote a rather shrill endorsement of withdrawing from the political system.
I loved it.
In lieu of endorsing a candidate. But, I also kind of left things open in the sense of I said, okay, look, this system is nuts. It's going to kill our civilization, so we need to get, withdrawing from it is a first step. But that second step, I, of course, didn't really outline. And I guess this is just a major question of what we should be putting our effort and our money and our energy
What
towards.
is to be done?
Yeah, what is to be done? And I think probably most, I think the three of us agree with this, and I would say that most people listening to this podcast agree with this, that just believing that the GOP is going to save us, or they're the lesser of two evils, or blah blah blah. I think everyone knows that that's total bullshit. I mean, I think we don't even have to go into that. But if we agree on that, where we go is difficult. And I think in some ways this is the real toxic nature of the political system, is that. As Lenin said, it's the best opposition is the one you control. It's a kind of way that it does keep you controlled. It keeps what you want and what you can do confined into certain channels. And I think the political system is very good at that. And what we can do outside of it, I think one thing we can do is obviously build a culture of our own, and I think that's a difficult task, a very important one. It's a task certainly the left did quite well, so we should. Take a lead from them in that case, but what we can do in terms of affecting politics outside of culture, but really, not just maybe even affecting politics, but being involved with power, with political power. What do we do? I just simply have absolutely no answer. Also, let me just mention this: some people suggest localism or something, but. Again, what are we going to all run for school board or something? I don't. It's just that doesn't really strike me. That strikes me as kind of a quaint, nostalgic way of looking at things. Like, I don't think local politicians are doing much of anything important, and they're obviously it's national politicians who have real power. So anyway, I just simply from this standpoint, I really don't have very many solutions. But
well, I don't. Yeah. So you're looking to us for for possibilities. I would, just bringing up the Pat Buchanan thing for a minute. Pat, of course, has endorsed Romney, not to the surprise of me, and probably not to the surprise of many people listening to this podcast, because, like we were talking about, the three of us were talking about before we went on the air, as it were. That seems to be what Pat does, and I like Pat a lot. But he tends to be very very strong, saying we got to take this conservative position and challenging the GOP establishment, but then ultimately endorsing their candidate. He did that in '92, and when he was running, and then the one exception was in 2000 when he ran on an independent. Or on a different party, or a third party that one year. But but generally speaking, he's always ended up endorsing, whoever the guy was that the GOP was putting up there, and he has his reasons for doing that, and or he had these stated reasons which he gives in his article. And where is it? Human Events? Is that where it's posted?
Oh, it's a syndicated article, so it's it's at Human Events. You can find it at Talkie Mag and
right
everywhere. Let me mention a few things. I mean, we should remember about Pat that at a very young age, I believe when he was 29, he was working for Richard Nixon. And he, when he was around my age, he was, in the corridors of power and so on and so forth. He was always very loyal to Nixon as well. So, this is a man who's really been around power. He values loyalty, and I might even just give him a pass. I mean, I'm not justifying Pat's decision, but this is someone who was really a part of it all, and I think he still wants to be a part of it all. And that's understandable. I think also it is kind of interesting because in previous years he would make different kinds of arguments, kind of like this is the only chance that we have national unity. We need to all come home to the GOP, and we've got to change the GOP on the inside. He's made those arguments a couple of times when he supported people whom that he disagreed with profoundly, such as George W. Bush and so on and so forth, and McCain even more so. Interesting. What I found interesting about this one is that he starts off the piece talking about John Jay and from the Federalist Papers and this notion of America was blessed because all her nation shared ancestors, i.e., most everyone was Anglo-Saxon, overwhelmingly Protestant, or at the very least, they were European Christians. So there was a kind of concentric circles where everyone could get along. And then the Irish came. And no, just kidding. But everyone could get along. Even the Irish have been, though obviously they're kind of a wedge, but they're certainly
pluralist Catholics.
Yeah, then the Catholics can. But they've obviously been fully assimilated. I mean, America has a white population. But anyway, he starts out mentioning all those things, and he talks about it culturally as well, with these big 50-50 divides on things like abortion and things like that, gay marriage. And then he says, basically, this is, I think, the key, the crux of the argument. For if America is to endure as a nation, her peoples are going to need the freedom to live differently and the space to live apart, according to their irreconcilable beliefs. Yet, should Barack Obama win, the centralization of power and control will continue beyond the point of no return. So I think what he's saying here is that Romney is a libertarian, and he'll let us, he won't stress national unity. He'll let us be ourselves, away from the dominant culture, which is gay marriage and so on and so forth. But if Obama wins, he'll force us all into a national unity. So it's worth mentioning that this is a major, major turn for Pat. He's basically arguing against national unity, that are the only thing we should... Yeah. Well, kind of. I mean, maybe it ultimately leads to secession, but he's basically saying we need to secede, at least morally and culturally, from the rest of the nation, and that Romney is our best chance of doing that. Now, I don't know.
He's basically speaking out in favor of diversity.
Yeah, he is. He is in a way. I don't know. I don't know. I think one could object to a lot of the particulars of that argument, and I would, but I don't think it's really worth going into it. I think it's very interesting that one of the more prominent American nationalists is now making these arguments. I guess the sad thing is that it all comes down to who you vote for, and I think we need to go beyond that. I think also we probably need to go beyond that, and that I'm probably less anti-liberal than Pat. I don't think I don't think a lot of the silly liberals who live in Boston or Park Slope, Brooklyn or something are really the problem. I think if you if you look at the civilization that they have, you definitely have more. You have a ton of people engaged in the community. You have people patroning local businesses. You have people beautifying their surroundings. I kind of think that in some ways all this culture war stuff, which Pat is really known for, is just a way to divide white people. So I think we should actually.
I remember Richard, I remember you telling me one time that you were pro Swipple, that you liked the, which caught me off guard. But I understand your point. I mean, I think I understood it when you explained it before, and I think you just made the case for it again.
Yeah.
Just now, even if these people are a bunch of silly, liberals in a lot of ways, they have a lot of good traits too that we should value.
Yeah. I mean, I can live with them in a way that I can't live with others, so I think we should.
It's okay to be a Swipple, but it's not okay to vote for Romney.
I guess that is my argument.
Yeah, you make it sound a bit like a kind of as if voting for Romney is a Faustian bargain. Like, you vote for the guy now, you're signed up for eternity. And I don't think it really has to be like that. You could completely cynically vote for Romney just because he's the white candidate, and then you could do all this other stuff like look for alternative routes to power as well.
Yeah.
What I really tire of, and I think it sounds like Pat uses this engages in this kind of rhetoric a bit in his latest article, but again, I like Pat. Nothing against Pat, but I really get tired of this. Oh, the forces of darkness are pushing against. That they're overwhelming us, but so that's why we need to get out and vote. Because otherwise, if the other guy wins, that just could be it for us. I mean, this kind of apocalyptic rhetoric concerning elections, like this is what they always say. This is the most important election ever. That's like a direct quote. Say that about every single damn election, that there has been in the last 12, 16, 20 years.
Yeah.
And it just gets so old and so tiresome. And of course, the truth is, and I think we would all agree with this, that it doesn't ultimately matter whether Romney or Obama wins this Tuesday. In a way, the forces of darkness have already overwhelmed us, and they will continue to.
Yeah.
But in a way, there is also a way out, of our current dire situation. But it's just not through voting for a president.
Oh yeah, and I think we've got to stop spending our resources, all of our resources, time, energy, labor, money, etc., supporting this kind of nonsense. And we should all support our nonsense, alternative right, so on and so forth. It's my fundraising pitch. You know who you are. But I'm kind of serious when I say that. I do think we need a culture of our own, and I don't know. I find it's kind of funny. Even baby boomers seem to believe in the GOP more than I do. It's almost like it's like, haven't you guys been through 20 elections? I mean, you still believe this nonsense? I mean, this is the most important one. If we don't do this, we'll be in full-blown socialism by 2013 or something. I mean, it's just...
Yeah. Well, it's just... Part of it is the psychological... You talk about spending our resources, our financial resources. There's a psychological toll to just wearing people out or tying them up in knots, and saying, if you don't get out and vote, because your vote doesn't matter anyway. It's not like you voting one way or the other is going to change the election. And so, of course, it's just a cynical ploy by the people who are in power to try to get you to help either put them in power or keep them in power.
Yeah.
But I just, there's something just to me so loathsome about that, which is part of why I've just been avoiding the whole thing, just this whole apocalyptic rhetoric about an election, when we all know damn well it's not it's just not going to matter that much who wins.
No,
But
absolutely.
won't it matter in a kind of totemic way rather than a political way or a policy way?
Well, you mean in terms of Barack Obama representing multiculti America?
Yeah, the symbol of black power, and even though he's not actually going to give all the black voters all the kind of freebies that they're hoping for, obviously, simply can't afford to, for one thing.
Yeah.
And same case, of course, having Romney there, he's not going to really do anything about the real problems of the country, but still, he has a kind of totemic value as a symbol of whiteness or white power.
Yeah, maybe, but wouldn't Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton be the same? I mean, I don't always like that. I guess also maybe I want Barack Obama to have totemic power so that he'll kind of shove people's faces in it, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
I'm kind
the worse is better thing.
So 4 years wasn't enough to wake people up.
Well, apparently not. Well, I think maybe a big election loss will wake them up. I don't know. I actually think what Colin's saying is true in the sense of we shouldn't. I think the worse the better is not always the best idea to get into, because at some level they'll never wake up. I mean, you need leadership. You need some way for them to articulate some of their frustrations, and you need a higher vision and a goal for people to move towards. And just thinking that it's going to get really bad, and then the white man will go grab his gun and take to the streets. Or I mean,
the day of the rope.
Yeah, the day. People have been talking about this for decades. White nationalist or right wing constitutionalist types, and it's just never going to happen. That's not how history works. History works through leadership. And so anyway, we need to somehow create leadership. Go ahead.
It seems like it's part of in some ways, the populist myth, which is what Pat Buchanan buys into largely. And in some ways what the United States has always been built around, this somehow the inherent wisdom and goodness of the majority. And of course, it's not true, but it's what people believe. It's a very prevalent myth, and so.
Well, I think what you're getting at is this democratic bug, which is really it certainly took hold in the 20th century, and I don't know how we can get rid of it now. It's just this idea that if someone, I think some people, more than the race stuff or questioning, Israel and Jewish power, maybe even like more shocking to people is the notion that the majority is not only not necessarily good, but it's probably bad, and that we shouldn't allow any of these people to vote. That they don't know what they're talking about. That's not how we should be making decisions. When we make other decisions, we don't put it to votes. I mean, it's crazy, and that
I think the next superpower is already working on that basis.
You mean China?
Yes. Well, they don't have mass participatory democracy. They have their little ruling elites, and they sort of decide which policies will work best for the country.
And it's clearly working well for them. I think in some ways there has to be some kind of participation, and I think with China, the participation is probably through A, economic success, and then B, nationalism, kind of a Sino-nationalism.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been very aware of that in recent months here in Japan.
Oh, sure.
With the Senkaku Island dispute riots and the vandalization of Japanese property. I wrote about a very large exhibition at Tokyo National Museum, which is dedicated to the various Chinese dynasties.
Uh-huh.
And this exhibition had the misfortune to sort of open a couple of weeks ago. And because of all the kind of anti-Chinese feeling, there were very, very few people in attendance. So it's a really poisoning relations between the two countries.
That's interesting. Where do you think that will? I mean, as China is a rising power, do you think Japan will make friends with them at some point? I mean, I'm sure they have a tremendous amount of economic connections with China being this production center of the world.
Yeah, they do more business with China now than with America. So economically, they're more tied to China.
Yeah.
But politically and in terms of defense and diplomacy and the rest, they're still very much in America's backyard. And of course, Japan is vital to American power. And the reason it's so vital is it actually works rather like a door. So America can sort of close that door on China. It can prevent China from having access to the sea lanes and to the rest of the world. So America basically has a stranglehold on China's access to the outside world.
Huh.
And the Chinese want to break that in some way. And that's probably what they're sort of working on in all sorts of interesting and devious ways.
I wonder what will happen because, the whole, I think Niall Ferguson called it Chimerica, and what Chimerica basically is that America is a consuming hotbed, and then China is a production hotbed, and then
you got to do what you're good at, eh?
Yeah, right. And then America is
we're good at buying stuff.
We're good at buying stuff, yes. USA. But also China loans Americans money to buy their stuff. So it's actually a kind of obviously unsustainable, incestuous relationship of like vendor financing. Like we'll loan you money and then you'll buy stuff I make. It's kind of like, what? Why don't you cut out the middleman or something? But anyway, but I think also you can think of it in, and I don't want to seem too white supremacist here, because I am a very PC guy, but you see, whenever you get a new, when I got my new laptop here, which is Apple, you get it, it says, designed in California, manufactured in China. And there's almost a kind of like, there's almost a kind of white supremacist notion of like, Johnny Ive and company are, using, they're drawing out beautiful designs. And then they hand it over to the satanic mills where, slaves create computers, and then we ship them off to Richard Spencer, who, gets to use it. I mean, it's kind of horrible or something. But I wonder if I wonder if the Chinese could really design a beautiful product on their own. I know that's probably going to shock. I'm really not I'm hardly anti-China. I think we should have better relations with China, and I really don't want to seem like that, but it does really seem that it's been the West that's developed these amazing products, and the Chinese and into the Japanese to a large extent will kind of miniaturize them and reproduce them in great quantities. But the innovation really occurs amongst the white man. That's at least my impression. That might be changing pretty dramatically. Also interesting, this Beijing Genomics Institute, they seem to be very interested in learning the secrets of high intelligence and essentially pursuing a kind of, for lack of a better word, eugenics program to start to breed more very highly intelligent Chinese.
Really?
So yeah, it's very interesting. The Chinese don't have any of this...
hang-ups.
Yeah, any of these hang-ups.
They're not squeamish about things like that, are they?
It's not like they're doing anything that at least I would consider immoral. I mean, they're just basically trying to find a constellation of genes for genius-level intelligence, and then they're trying to encourage the production of these geniuses. But I don't know, maybe, not to sound too romantic or something, but maybe this is one of those things that, even Richard Lynn can't measure. I think genius might be a kind of Faustian spark that you can't really reproduce in a lab. But anyway, I'm rambling here. Yes, I think I think the long story short is that clearly the world power is going to be shifting somewhere else. I think just even the amount of time and energy Americans put into this damn election is just signifying that. It's just this bizarre, stupid spectacle that everyone talks about for years, and and the politicians have to, both parties have to tell Americans again and again, like, you are the greatest. Never has there been such a wise people. I mean, it's sickening. It's stupid. And, I think in some ways this just vulgar process is itself an expression of American decline and American delusion. But anyway, should we end it on that note? Will the election actually end on Tuesday? Or will it just keep going? Like they're like...
Is it the McLaughlin group kind of question?
Yes. Between 1 and 10. 1 being 0, 10 being metaphysical certitude. Will the election end on Tuesday?
Well, it's going to either be Obomni or Obama, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obomni or Obama.
I think it's very likely that it might stretch out. It might end up in the courts. God help us, and then we have to hear about it every day for another month or two. Who knows how long?
I hope so.
Yes, so do I.
My life is empty otherwise. Anyway, well, guys, let's put a bookmark in the conversation, and we'll pick it up next week.
Right, we'll know the result, hopefully.
Yes, maybe.
Maybe not. We'll see.
All right, talk to you guys later.
All right. Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.